The acrid smell of whiskey and cigar smoke had seeped so deeply into my uniform that I could barely remember what clean air tasted like anymore. I carried another tray of overpriced scotch toward table 12, my lower back screaming with each careful step across the polished marble floor of the Sovereign Club, Manhattan's most exclusive private establishment, where a single drink cost more than my weekly rent. The tray seemed heavier tonight, or maybe I was just more tired. 4 months of this schedule, 6 nights a week, 12-hour shifts balancing drinks and dodging wandering hands, all while hiding the small but undeniable curve of my belly beneath carefully chosen clothing. I set each glass down with the practiced precision that Marcus, our floor manager, demanded from every server. One mistake in front of the wrong member could cost you your job, and I couldn't afford to lose this position. Not now. The crystal clinked softly against the imported Italian marble tabletop as I retreated with a professional smile that never reached my eyes. My feet ached in the required 3-inch heels, another torture device mandated by the club's strict dress code. The black dress they made us wear was at least forgiving around the waist, designed to create an elegant silhouette without being too form-fitting. It was the only reason I'd been able to hide my condition this long. The Sovereign occupied 3 floors of a pre-war building in Midtown, all dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in my entire lifetime. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, though heavy velvet curtains often kept the outside world at bay. The members liked their privacy. They liked a lot of things that made my skin crawl. But I smiled through it all because the tips were good and the money was desperately needed. I'd been working here since June, taking the job 2 weeks after realizing that David, my baby's father, wasn't coming back. He disappeared like smoke in wind, leaving behind unpaid rent, empty promises, and a positive pregnancy test I'd taken alone in a gas station bathroom. The job at the Sovereign had been a lifeline then. Now it felt like a noose tightening slowly around my neck, but at least it was steady income. Lila. Marcus's sharp voice cut through the ambient conversation and soft jazz playing over hidden speakers. I turned to see him gesturing urgently from the entrance to the private dining rooms on the 2nd floor. His expression carried that particular blend of annoyance and anxiety that meant important guests had arrived. VIP room 3, now. My stomach dropped. The VIP rooms were reserved for the club's most elite members, the ones who paid 6-figure annual fees for absolute privacy and impeccable service. They were also the rooms where I felt most vulnerable, away from the relative safety of the main floor's open spaces. But refusing wasn't an option. I nodded and made my way toward the marble staircase, my hand instinctively moving to touch the small pendant at my neck. A cheap silver chain with a tiny Korean character my father had given me years ago. The gesture was unconscious now, a nervous habit I developed whenever stress threatened to overwhelm me. My father. Commander William Morrison, retired Army intelligence, had been so many things to me. Protector, teacher, the only person who'd ever truly seen me. He'd adopted me when I was 7 years old, pulling me out of a failing foster system and giving me a real home. He'd taught me Korean during long evenings at our kitchen table, explaining that language was a weapon, a shield, a door to understanding worlds most people never saw. He'd worked as an interpreter and consultant after leaving the military, though he'd never talked much about the specifics. Too classified, he'd say with a wink. He'd died 2 years ago. Heart attack, the doctors said, though something about it had never sat right with me. He'd been healthy, careful, disciplined in everything he did. But the autopsy showed a massive cardiac event, and without money for private investigators or endless questions, I'd had to accept it and move on. Move on and survive, which I'd been doing with varying degrees of success ever since. I climbed the stairs, each step sending little jolts of discomfort through my lower back. The 2nd floor hallway was quieter, thickly carpeted to muffle sound. Private dining room 3 was at the end, its heavy wooden door closed. I paused outside, taking a deep breath and arranging my face into that neutral, pleasant expression that was part of the uniform. Then I knocked twice and entered. The room was smaller than the main floor spaces, but infinitely more luxurious. A single table dominated the center, set with crystal and silver that caught the light from a chandelier overhead. 3 men sat around it, all in expensive suits, all turning to look at me with the casual assessment wealthy men give to service staff. 2 of them were older, probably in their 50s, with the kind of groomed appearance that came from personal trainers and regular spa visits. They barely registered my presence before returning to their conversation, something about shipping contracts and West Coast ports. The 3rd man was younger, maybe early 30s, and when his eyes met mine, something in my chest constricted painfully. Korean features, sharp and aristocratic, with high cheekbones and a jawline that could have been carved from marble. His black hair was styled with careful perfection, his charcoal suit tailored so precisely it probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. He watched me enter with the kind of focused attention that made the small hairs on the back of my neck stand up, though I couldn't say why. Something about his eyes, dark and intelligent and calculating, made me feel like a butterfly pinned to a board. "Your server for the evening," I said, keeping my voice professional and warm. "Can I start you with drinks, or would you prefer to see the wine list?" The older men ordered expensive whiskey without looking at me, but the younger one kept his gaze fixed on my face in a way that was almost unsettling in its intensity. "The Macallan 25, he said, his voice carrying the barest trace of a Korean accent underneath American English. "Neat." I nodded, making notes on the small pad I kept in my apron pocket, hyper-aware of his continued scrutiny. Something about him felt dangerous in a way I couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't just wealth or power, though he clearly had both. It was something deeper, more fundamental. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed, to getting exactly what he wanted, regardless of obstacles. "I'll bring those right out," I said, backing toward the door with the smooth efficiency of long practice. "Wait." The single word stopped me mid-step. The younger man leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Do you speak Korean?" The question hit me like a physical blow, unexpected and jarring. I kept my face carefully neutral, though my heart had suddenly begun racing. "No, sir, I don't. Is there something specific you need?" He studied me for another long moment, and I had the disturbing sensation that he could see right through the lie. But then one of the older men said something in Korean, pulling his attention away, and I escaped into the hallway. My hands were shaking as I closed the door behind me. That question, that specific, pointed question, it couldn't be a coincidence. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to calm the panic rising in my throat. Nobody here knew about my father or my background. I'd kept everything private, given only the minimum information required for employment. There was no reason for anyone to suspect I understood Korean, much less spoke it fluently. I descended to the first floor and made my way to the bar, requesting the drinks from Jake, our head bartender. While he poured, I tried to shake off the lingering unease from the encounter. It was nothing. Just a random question from a rich patron who probably asked every server the same thing. I was being paranoid, letting stress and exhaustion play tricks on my mind. "You okay, Lila?" Jake asked, sliding the drinks across the polished bar top. "You look pale." "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Long shift." I carried the tray back upstairs, steadying myself before entering the room again. The conversation had shifted to something about market territories and distribution networks, terms that sounded like legitimate business but carried an undercurrent of something else. I set each drink down carefully, starting with the older men and ending with the younger one who'd asked about Korean. As I placed his glass in front of him, he spoke again, this time in rapid Korean directed at his companions. The words were crude and casual, the kind of thing men said when they thought no one else could understand. He called me a pretty decoration, questioned whether I was as stupid as I looked, and made a vulgar comment about whether black women were as good in bed as the rumors suggested. His companions laughed, one adding his own racist observation. Rage flooded through me, hot and immediate, pushing past the careful control I'd maintained for months. These men, with their expensive suits and casual cruelty, thought I was deaf to their disrespect because of my race and position. The assumption that I couldn't understand was almost as insulting as the words themselves. I should have stayed silent, should have finished serving and left the room, should have swallowed the anger the way I'd swallowed so many other indignities in this job. But something in me snapped, and before I could stop myself, I responded in perfect, accentless Korean. Your mother would be ashamed of the man you've become. The room went absolutely silent. All three men turned to stare at me, but the younger one's expression transformed from casual amusement to something hard and dangerous. He stood slowly, his full height revealed as he moved around the table toward me. He was tall, I realized, maybe 6'2", and the way he moved suggested violence held carefully in check. Say that again, he commanded in English, his voice deadly quiet. I was already regretting my impulse, fear flooding in to replace the anger. But I'd committed now, and backing down would only make things worse. I said, I repeated in English, your mother would be ashamed. His hand shot out faster than I could react, gripping my wrist hard enough to hurt. You understand Korean? He said. Not a question, but an accusation. Who taught you? Let go of me. I tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Answer the question. Who are you? I'm nobody, I gasped, genuine fear blooming now. Just a server who happens to speak the language. Please, you're hurting me. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. Up close, I could see the absolute fury in his dark eyes, the dangerous tension in his jaw. This was a man capable of extreme violence, I realized. A man who hurt people who crossed him. You're lying, he said softly. Nobody speaks Korean that perfectly by accident. Who sent you here? Who do you work for? I work for the sovereign, I insisted, my voice shaking. I don't know what you're talking about. One of the older men said something urgent in Korean, a warning, and the younger man released my wrist so suddenly I stumbled backward. But his eyes never left my face. What's your name? He demanded. Lila Morrison, I said, rubbing my wrist where his fingers had left red marks. Morrison, he repeated, something changing in his expression. William Morrison's daughter. My blood went cold. How do you know my father? Get out, he said instead of answering. Now. I didn't need to be told twice. I fled from the room, my heart hammering, my wrist throbbing. I made it halfway down the stairs, before Marcus intercepted me, his face flushed with anger. What the hell did you do up there? He demanded. Mr. Park just called me. You're fired. Security will escort you out. Mr. Park. So that was his name. I wanted to explain, to defend myself, but what could I say? That I'd insulted a VIP guest because he'd made racist comments in a language he thought I couldn't understand? That wouldn't save my job. Nothing would. 2 security guards appeared at Marcus's gesture, professional but implacable. They escorted me to the locker room where I collected my few personal belongings, then walked me through the service entrance to the street. The October night air hit me like a slap, cold and sharp after the climate-controlled comfort of the club. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, shaking with adrenaline and fear and shock. Fired. I was fired. And not just fired, but fired for crossing someone who knew my father's name, who recognized me despite having never met me before. The implications made my head spin. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Don't go home. They're already there. Wait at the coffee shop on 52nd and 3rd. You have 10 minutes. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This was insane. This entire night had become a nightmare. But beneath the fear, a cold certainty was forming. Whatever my father had been involved in before he died, whatever secrets he'd kept, they'd just found me. And I had a terrible feeling that 10 minutes wouldn't be nearly enough time to understand the danger I was in. I walked the 3 blocks to the coffee shop on 52nd and 3rd in a daze, my mind refusing to process what was happening. The late October wind cut through my thin jacket, and I realized I was still wearing my server uniform, the black dress and uncomfortable heels that now felt like a costume from someone else's life. The streets were busy with the usual Thursday night crowd, people heading to dinner or drinks, living normal lives where wealthy men didn't grab your wrist and somehow know your dead father's name. The coffee shop was one of those generic chains that dotted every corner of Manhattan. Bright fluorescent lights, and the smell of burnt espresso. I ordered a decaf tea I didn't want, and sat at a table near the window, watching the street outside with growing paranoia. Every person who passed became a potential threat. Every car that slowed down made my heart race. The text had said 10 minutes. It had been 8. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Look across the street. Black car. Get in. Through the window, I could see a black sedan idling at the curb, its windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever was inside. Everything in me screamed that getting in that car was a terrible idea, but the alternative was going home to an apartment that someone had apparently already searched or compromised. At least with the car, there was a chance of getting answers about what my father had done, what I'd stumbled into. I left my untouched tea on the table and crossed the street, my heels clicking against the pavement. The back door of the sedan opened as I approached, and I climbed inside before I could talk myself out of it. The door closed behind me with a solid thunk that sounded too much like a prison cell locking. The interior was all black leather and tinted windows. A partition separated the back seat from the driver, giving us privacy. And sitting beside me, his expensive suit somehow looking even more perfect in the confined space, was Logan Park. "You should have stayed quiet," he said without preamble, his dark eyes studying me with that same intense focus from the club. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "What I've done." Anger flared through my fear. "You were the one making racist comments in Korean, because you assumed the help couldn't understand. Don't blame me for calling you out on your bullshit." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "That wasn't the problem. The problem is that you revealed you speak fluent Korean in a room with 2 men who now have questions about who you are and why you're working in a place where they conduct very sensitive business. The problem is that you're William Morrison's daughter, which makes you a potential intelligence asset or threat depending on what you know." "I don't know anything," I insisted, but my voice lacked conviction. "My father died 2 years ago. Heart attack." "Your father," Logan said slowly, "was one of the most effective FBI informants targeting Korean organized crime in the last 20 years. He didn't die of a heart attack. He was murdered because he knew too much and couldn't be controlled anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're lying." "I wish I was." He pulled out a tablet from the seat pocket and swiped through several screens before turning it to face me. "This is your father's file, or what's left of it after someone scrubbed most of the details." I stared at the screen, seeing my father's face in an official-looking document. The text was heavily redacted, black bars covering most of the information, but what remained confirmed Logan's story. William Morrison, FBI confidential informant, specializing in Korean organized crime, Korean language interpretation, infiltration of criminal networks. Active from 2008 to 2023. Status: deceased. Circumstances under investigation. "He never told me," I whispered, my hands trembling. "He said he did interpretation work for law enforcement, but I thought it was just translating documents, sitting in courtrooms." He did more than translate, Logan said, taking the tablet back. He infiltrated organizations, wore wires, gathered evidence. He was good at it because he was patient and thorough, and because nobody suspected the friendly black man with the adopted daughter of being anything more than what he appeared. He helped put away some very dangerous people. Including you, I asked, meeting his eyes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He tried, but I'm very careful about who I trust and what I say. Your father gathered some information on my organization, but nothing that could be used in court. Nothing concrete enough to act on. So, why does it matter that I speak Korean? I was trying to piece together the threat I apparently posed. I'm not my father. I'm just a waitress trying to survive. You're his daughter, Logan said, as if that explained everything. Which means there's a chance he told you things, gave you information, left you files or evidence. Those two men in that room tonight, they're affiliated with a rival organization. When they realized you understood every word they said, they started wondering what else you might understand. What other conversations you might have overheard in that club. Whether you're gathering intelligence the way your father did. I laughed, the sound bitter and exhausted. That's insane. I'm not a spy. I'm 6 months pregnant and barely making rent. I took that job because it paid better than anything else I qualified for, not because I was infiltrating anyone. His eyes dropped to my stomach, hidden beneath the loose black dress, and something shifted in his expression. You're pregnant. Congratulations, you're observant. I wrapped my arms around myself defensively. The father's gone, I'm on my own, and now I'm also unemployed, because you got me fired. So if you're done explaining how I'm somehow a threat to Korean organized crime, can you let me out of this car? No. The single word was flat and final. Your apartment was searched tonight by professionals who know how to make it look like nothing happened. They're looking for anything your father might have left you. Files, hard drives, passwords, safe deposit box keys. And when they don't find anything obvious, they're going to come back and ask you directly. I don't have anything, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I remembered the storage unit. My father had maintained a small unit in Queens, paid up 5 years in advance before he died. I'd been there once to store some of his belongings. I couldn't fit in my tiny apartment. Boxes of his clothes and books and papers I hadn't had the heart to go through yet. There's nothing to find. Logan studied my face, and I had the uncomfortable sensation that he could read the lie there. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to stay somewhere safe while I figure out who searched your apartment and what they're looking for. You're going to tell me everything your father ever said about his work. And you're going to pray that whatever information he had died with him, because if it's still out there, people will do terrible things to find it. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said, reaching for the door handle. It didn't move under my hand. Child locks, I realized. I was trapped. You don't have a choice, Logan said, not unkindly. Those men from the club know your name now. They know you're William Morrison's daughter. By tomorrow morning, half the Korean organizations in New York will know you exist. Some will want to recruit you thinking you have your father's skills. Others will want to eliminate you as a potential threat. And a few will want to use you as leverage against competitors. None of those options end well for you. So what? You're kidnapping me for my own protection? The absurdity of it would have been funny if I wasn't so terrified. How is that better? Because, Logan said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. I knew your father. Not well, but I respected what he was trying to do, even if we were on opposite sides. He was a good man trying to make the world safer for his daughter. I'm not going to let that work be wasted by having you end up dead in an alley because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wanted to argue, to fight, to insist on my independence and right to make my own choices. But the truth was that I had no idea what I was dealing with. No idea how to protect myself or my unborn baby from threats I couldn't even properly understand. And despite everything, despite the fear and anger and confusion, something in Logan's eyes suggested he was telling the truth about knowing my father. "Fine," I said finally, the word tasting like defeat. "But I want answers. Real answers about who my father was and what he did, about who killed him and why." "I'll tell you what I can," Logan agreed. "But first, we need to get you somewhere secure." He pressed a button on the door panel and spoke in Korean to the driver. "Take us to the safe house in Brooklyn." The car pulled smoothly into traffic, and I watched Manhattan slide past the tinted windows, feeling like I was saying goodbye to the last remnants of my normal life. The woman who'd gone to work that morning, worried about tips and rent and morning sickness, no longer existed. In her place was someone dangerous, someone people would kill for or kill to protect. Someone who carried her father's secrets whether she knew what they were or not. "What should I call you?" I asked after several minutes of silence. "Mr. Park seems too formal for my kidnapper." "Logan," he said. "My American name, though my organization knows me as Park Jin-woo." "And what exactly is your organization?" I needed to understand what I was dealing with. "What do you do that made my father target you?" Logan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "I run a business that operates in the spaces between legal and illegal. Import-export, primarily. High-end goods, art, electronics. Some of it legitimate, some of it acquired through less conventional means. I also provide services, protection, connections, access to resources that aren't available through traditional channels." "You're a criminal," I said bluntly. "I'm a businessman who recognizes that laws are often arbitrary and designed to benefit those already in power," he corrected. "But yes, by legal definition, much of what I do is criminal. Your father understood that. He didn't hate us. He just believed in the system we operate outside of." The car had left Manhattan now, crossing into Brooklyn through streets I didn't recognize. The buildings changed from towering glass and steel to lower brownstones and industrial spaces. After about 20 minutes, we pulled up in front of a nondescript warehouse in what looked like a largely abandoned industrial area. "This is the safe house?" I asked skeptically. It looked like the kind of place people got murdered in crime dramas. "Appearances are deceiving," Logan said as the car stopped. He climbed out first, then offered his hand to help me. I ignored it and stepped out on my own, immediately regretting it as my heel caught on the curb and I stumbled. Logan caught my arm, steadying me with that same casual strength he'd demonstrated in the club. "Stubborn," he observed. "Your father mentioned that about you once." "You talked to my father about me?" The idea was disturbing on multiple levels. "Once, briefly. He was very proud of you going to college, making your own way. He wanted better for you than the life he'd lived." Logan guided me toward a heavy metal door. "I think he'd be disappointed to see you working in a place like the Sovereign." "Yeah, well, life doesn't always work out the way we plan." I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the evening chill. "And he's not here to be disappointed anymore." The door opened before we reached it, revealing a young Korean man in dark clothing, his eyes sharp and assessing as they swept over me. Logan spoke to him in rapid Korean, too fast for me to catch more than a few words. Something about security and monitoring and checking backgrounds. The young man nodded and stepped aside. The interior of the warehouse was nothing like the exterior suggested. It had been converted into a surprisingly comfortable living space, with exposed brick walls, modern furniture, and soft lighting that created an almost cozy atmosphere. A kitchen area occupied one corner, a living space with leather couches another, and I could see doors leading to what I assumed were bedrooms and bathrooms. "You'll stay here," Logan said, leading me through the main space. There are 3 bedrooms. Pick whichever you want. The kitchen is fully stocked. Jinho will be outside providing security. You're free to move around inside, but don't try to leave without me. So, I'm a prisoner with nice accommodations, I said. That's supposed to make this better. It's supposed to keep you alive. Logan's voice hardened slightly. I need to handle the situation at the club. Make sure those 2 men don't cause problems. While I'm gone, Jinho will watch the entrance. If anyone tries to get in who shouldn't, he'll handle it. If you need anything, tell him, and he'll arrange it. What if I need to leave? I challenged. What if I just want to go home and deal with whatever comes? Logan turned to face me fully, and in that moment, I saw the dangerous man beneath the civilized exterior. Then you'll die, he said simply, and your baby will die with you. Is that what you want? Is your pride worth more than your child's life? The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. He was right, and I hated him for it. But my hand moved instinctively to my stomach, that protective gesture that had become automatic over the past months. Whatever else I was or wasn't, I was going to be a mother. That baby deserved a chance at life, even if that meant swallowing my pride and accepting help from a man who admitted to being a criminal. Fine, I said quietly. I'll stay. But I want information. I want to know what my father was involved in, what got him killed, what you think I might know that makes me worth protecting. Tomorrow, Logan promised. Tonight you need rest. You look exhausted. His eyes softened slightly. When's the baby due? February, I said. Valentine's Day, ironically. Something that might have been sympathy crossed his face. The father really isn't in the picture? He left before I even knew I was pregnant. I haven't heard from him in 4 months. The admission hurt, even now. I don't even know if he's alive or dead, or just decided he didn't want the responsibility. His loss, Logan said quietly. Then, as if realizing he'd revealed too much humanity, he straightened, and his professional mask slipped back into place. Get some sleep. I'll be back in the morning with breakfast and answers. He left before I could respond, the heavy metal door closing behind him with a final sounding thud. I heard him speaking to Jinho in Korean, giving instructions I couldn't quite make out through the thick walls. Then silence. I stood in the middle of the converted warehouse, still wearing my server uniform, still processing everything that had happened in the last few hours. This morning, I'd been a struggling waitress, worried about rent and morning sickness. Tonight I was in protective custody from Korean organized crime because my father had been an FBI informant who'd apparently made powerful enemies before his death. The exhaustion hit me all at once, making my legs weak and my head swim. I needed to sit down, to think, to figure out what to do next. But my body had other ideas. I made it to one of the leather couches before my knees gave out, sinking into the soft cushions with a small sound of relief. Sleep found me there, still in my uniform, my hand resting protectively over my stomach where my baby slept, oblivious to the danger we were in. My last conscious thought was of my father, wondering what secrets he'd kept, and whether knowing them would save me or destroy me. Tomorrow I would get answers. Tomorrow I would figure out how to survive this. Tonight, I just needed to close my eyes and pretend for a few hours that everything would somehow be okay. I woke to sunlight streaming through industrial windows I didn't recognize, my neck stiff from sleeping at an awkward angle on the leather couch. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was late for work, that I needed to rush to get ready for another shift at the Sovereign. Then the events of last night came flooding back with crushing clarity. The confrontation with Logan Park. The revelation about my father. The warehouse safe house where I was now apparently living under the protection of a criminal organization. I sat up slowly, my hand moving to my lower back where a dull ache had taken up permanent residence. The baby shifted inside me, a flutter of movement that still felt strange and miraculous even after months of feeling it. 6 months pregnant and hiding in a Brooklyn warehouse because my dead father had been an FBI informant. If someone had told me a week ago that this would be my life, I would have laughed. The smell of coffee and something savory drifted from the kitchen area. I turned to see Logan standing at the stove, still dressed in expensive clothes, but with his suit jacket removed and his sleeves rolled up to reveal surprisingly muscular forearms. He was cooking eggs, the domestic scene so incongruous with everything else about him that I almost laughed. "You're awake," he said, without turning around. "I brought breakfast. Figured you'd be hungry." "I need to use the bathroom," I said, standing on unsteady legs. My bladder was pressing urgently, a constant companion of pregnancy that I'd learned to navigate with frequent bathroom breaks. He gestured toward a door on the far side of the warehouse. "First door on the left. There are clean towels and some basic toiletries. Take your time." The bathroom was surprisingly well appointed, with modern fixtures and soft lighting that was easier on my eyes than the harsh warehouse fluorescence. I took care of necessities, then spent several minutes staring at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. I looked terrible. My makeup from last night was smudged under my eyes, my hair was a mess, and my server uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in it. But underneath the physical exhaustion, I could see something else in my eyes. Fear, yes, but also a growing anger at being put in this position, at having my life upended by secrets I'd never asked to carry. When I emerged, Logan had set the small dining table with plates of scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. There was orange juice, and what looked like herbal tea steaming in a mug. He'd changed into more casual clothes, dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow still managed to look expensive. Without the suit, he looked younger, more approachable, though his eyes still carried that calculating intelligence that made me wary. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair. "You need to eat. It's not good for the baby if you don't." "Everyone's suddenly concerned about my baby," I said. But I sat down anyway because the food smelled amazing, and my stomach was growling traitorously. "Last night you said you'd give me answers. I want to know what my father was doing, what information he supposedly had, and why someone would kill him for it." Logan sat across from me, his own plate untouched. "Your father worked with the FBI for 15 years, starting around 2008. He'd come to their attention because of his Korean language skills and his work as a freelance interpreter. They recruited him to help infiltrate Korean criminal organizations in New York and New Jersey. Why would he agree to that?" I took a bite of eggs, trying to process this information about the man I'd thought I knew. He was military, sure, but he'd retired. He had me to take care of. Why risk his life doing undercover work? "Because he believed in it," Logan said simply. He'd seen things during his military service in Korea that convinced him organized crime was a poison that destroyed communities. He wanted to make things safer, better, especially for you, and he was good at it. Nobody suspected the friendly, middle-aged black man who spoke perfect Korean of being anything more than what he appeared. I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. How many people did he help put away? Dozens over the years. Small operations mostly, mid-level operators. He was careful, patient. He'd spend months or even years building relationships, gathering evidence. The FBI would use his information to build cases, get warrants, make arrests. Logan paused, his expression darkening. But about 3 years ago, something changed. Your father discovered something bigger. Something that connected several major organizations to corrupt elements within the FBI itself. What kind of corruption? I was leaning forward now, drawn in despite my resistance. Agents who were supposed to be investigating organized crime were instead using their positions to facilitate it. Taking bribes to lose evidence, to tip off targets before raids, to protect certain operations while selectively prosecuting others. Your father found evidence of at least 4 agents who were on the take, including one fairly high-ranking supervisor. The implications made my head spin. So, instead of reporting it, someone killed him to keep him quiet? He tried to report it, Logan corrected. But the problem with exposing corruption within law enforcement is that you never know how deep it goes or who you can trust. He documented everything he found, created backup files, insurance policies in case something happened to him. And then someone arranged for him to have a heart attack that looked natural enough to avoid too many questions. I felt tears burning at the back of my eyes. How do you know all this? How do you know it wasn't just a real heart attack? Logan pulled out his tablet again, navigating to a file before sliding it across the table to me. Because 6 months after your father died, one of those corrupt agents was found dead in his car, apparent suicide. But before he died, he confessed to several murders, including William Morrison's. He'd used a chemical compound that induces cardiac arrest, something that wouldn't show up on a standard autopsy. The confession was suppressed, never made public, because it would have opened an investigation into the entire department. I stared at the document on the screen, seeing the redacted confession, the mention of my father's name. The tears spilled over then, and I couldn't stop them. My father hadn't died of natural causes. He'd been murdered for trying to do the right thing, and his death had been covered up to protect the people who'd killed him. I'm sorry, Logan said quietly. I know this isn't easy to hear. Why are you telling me this? I demanded, anger cutting through the grief. What do you want from me? If my father's dead and his killers are dead, why does any of this matter now? Because the files he created, the evidence he gathered, it never surfaced. The FBI doesn't have it, or they would have acted on it by now, which means he hid it somewhere, probably left some way for you to access it if something happened to him. Logan leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. And if you can access those files, they're worth millions to the right people. Or they're worth killing for, to the people who are implicated in them. The storage unit. The thought hit me like lightning. That's what he'd been doing. Why he'd paid 5 years in advance. He'd been creating a safe place to store his evidence, somewhere only I would eventually think to look. I don't know where any files are, I said, but I could hear the lie in my own voice. Logan heard it too. Lila, people are going to come looking. Those men from last night, they're just the beginning. Word is spreading that William Morrison's daughter has surfaced, that she speaks Korean fluently, that she might have access to her father's information. Every organization that might be implicated in those files is going to want to find you first, either to get the information or to make sure you can never reveal it. So, what do you suggest? I met his eyes, seeing my own fear reflected there. I can't just hide in this warehouse forever. I have a baby coming. I need to work, to have a life. You need to survive first, Logan said. And to do that, we need to find whatever your father left you before anyone else does. Then we can decide what to do with it. Maybe there's a way to use it as leverage, to buy your safety. Or maybe we destroy it and eliminate the threat entirely. We? I repeated. Why would you help me with this? You're part of the world my father was trying to take down. For all I know, you're in those files. A smile ghosted across Logan's lips. I probably am. Your father was thorough. But here's the thing, Lila. I respected your father even though we were on opposite sides. And I respect you for standing up to me last night when you knew it could cost you. You've got courage and intelligence. And those are rare qualities. He paused, something shifting in his expression. And the truth is, I'm tired of the corruption. Tired of not knowing which law enforcement contacts can be trusted and which ones are looking for opportunities to exploit. If your father's files expose the worst actors, that actually makes my life easier. It was a pragmatic argument, one that made a certain cold sense. Logan wasn't helping me out of altruism. He was helping because it served his interests. But did his motivations matter if the result was keeping me and my baby safe? "There's a storage unit," I said finally, the words feeling like a betrayal even as they left my mouth. "In Queens. My father rented it and paid for 5 years in advance before he died. I went there once to store some of his things, but I never really went through everything. If he hid files anywhere, that's where they'd be." Logan nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Do you have the key? The access code?" "The key is at my apartment, in a drawer in my bedroom." I felt sick saying it, knowing I was admitting to having exactly what dangerous people were looking for. "The code is my birthday." "Then we need to get to that storage unit before anyone else figures out it exists." Logan stood, already pulling out his phone. "But first, we need to get you some clothes that aren't a server uniform and retrieve that key from your apartment." "Is it safe to go back there?" I asked, standing as well. My body protested the movement, exhausted and sore from sleeping on the couch. "You said people searched it last night." "They did, but they were looking for obvious hiding places. Documents, hard drives, anything clearly related to your father's work. They probably didn't pay attention to a random key in your bedroom drawer." Logan was typing rapidly on his phone, sending messages to someone. "We'll go in fast, get what we need, and get out. Jinho will drive us and provide security." "And then what? We just walk into a storage unit that might have evidence that could bring down corrupt FBI agents and expose organized crime operations?" "That sounds incredibly dangerous." "It is dangerous," Logan agreed, meeting my eyes. "But staying here and waiting for them to find you is more dangerous. At least this way, we're taking action, controlling the situation instead of reacting to it." He had a point, though I hated to admit it. Sitting in this warehouse, waiting for threats I couldn't see or understand, would drive me insane. And maybe, just maybe, my father had left me something that could actually protect me instead of just making me a target. "Okay," I said, "but I have conditions. First, once we have whatever's in that storage unit, I want copies. I'm not trusting you or anyone else to be the only person with access to that information. Second, I want protection that extends beyond just me. If I have family or friends who might be targeted because of their connection to me, I want guarantees they'll be safe too." Logan considered this, a slight smile playing at his lips. "You negotiate like someone who's done this before." "My father taught me that everything is a negotiation," I said, remembering long conversations at our kitchen table about game theory and leverage. "He said the only time you have no power is when you believe you have no power." He was right. Logan extended his hand. "Deal. You get copies of everything we find, and I'll extend protection to anyone you designate. But in exchange, you work with me on this. No running off on your own, no trying to handle things independently until we know exactly what we're dealing with." I looked at his offered hand, knowing that shaking it meant committing to this path, to trusting a man who'd admitted to being a criminal. But what choice did I have? My father had set this in motion years ago, and I was the one who had to see it through. I shook his hand, his grip warm and firm. "Deal." "Good." Logan released my hand and checked his watch. "Jinho will be here with fresh clothes in about 20 minutes. Eat something while we wait. You're going to need your strength." I returned to my breakfast, forcing down eggs and toast that tasted like sawdust in my mouth. Logan made phone calls in rapid Korean, arranging logistics I only partially understood. Security details, backup plans, escape routes. He was thorough and professional, treating this like a military operation, which I supposed it was. When Jinho arrived with a bag of clothes, I was surprised to find that everything was in my size and style. Jeans, a comfortable sweater, flat boots that would be much easier to move in than heels. "How did you know what size I wear?" I asked Logan suspiciously. "I'm observant," was all he said. "And I have resources." I changed in the bathroom, grateful to be out of the wrinkled server uniform. The clothes fit perfectly, comfortable but practical. When I emerged, Logan was waiting by the door, now wearing a jacket that I suspected concealed a weapon. "Ready?" he asked. I touched the pendant at my neck, my father's gift, and thought about everything he'd sacrificed to try to make the world safer. If his files could finish what he started, expose the corruption that had gotten him killed, then maybe his death wouldn't have been in vain. "Ready," I said. We walked out into the bright October morning, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap of my father's design, one that would either save me or destroy me. Either way, there was no going back now. The game had begun, and I was no longer just a pawn. My father had made sure of that, even from beyond the grave. The drive back to my apartment in Queens felt surreal, like returning to a life that no longer belonged to me. Jinho drove with the careful efficiency of someone trained in evasive maneuvers, constantly checking mirrors and taking unexpected turns that would reveal anyone following us. Logan sat beside me in the back seat, his attention divided between his phone and the streets outside, that predatory alertness never quite leaving his posture. My neighborhood looked exactly as I'd left it 24 hours ago, though everything felt different now. The corner bodega where I bought groceries, the laundromat where I washed clothes every Sunday, the bus stop where I'd waited countless mornings on my way to work. All of it familiar and distant at the same time, like looking at photographs from someone else's life. "We go in fast," Logan instructed as Jinho circled the block for the third time, checking for surveillance. "Get the key, check for anything else that might be useful, and get out. No more than 5 minutes inside." "It's my apartment," I said, irritation bleeding through my fear. "I think I can take more than 5 minutes if I need to." His dark eyes fixed on me with that intensity I was beginning to recognize as his natural state. "Your apartment was compromised last night by professionals who know what they're doing. They might have left surveillance equipment, or they might be watching to see if you come back. 5 minutes, Lila. That's all we can risk." The building was a 5-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had once been working class, but was slowly gentrifying with the inevitable push of rising Manhattan rents. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, a tiny one-bedroom that cost more than it should have but was all I could afford. The hallway smelled like cooking spices and old carpet, familiar scents that made my chest ache with unexpected nostalgia. Logan had me wait while Jinho checked the stairwell. Then we climbed quickly, my hand on the railing for support as my pregnant belly made me slightly off balance. At my door, I fumbled with my keys, hyper-aware of every sound in the building. The television playing too loud in 3B, the baby crying in 3D, Mrs. Chen shuffling around in 3A. Normal sounds that felt dangerous now. The door swung open and I stepped inside, Logan close behind me. The apartment looked exactly as I'd left it, which somehow made it worse. If it had been obviously ransacked, at least I'd know what I was dealing with. Instead, everything was in its place, but I could feel the violation of strangers touching my things, searching through my private spaces. "The key," Logan prompted, his voice low and urgent. I moved to the bedroom, a space barely large enough for my second-hand bed and a small dresser, the drawer where I kept miscellaneous items, batteries and spare change and forgotten receipts, also held the small silver key to my father's storage unit. I'd kept it without really thinking about it. One more piece of him I couldn't let go of. Now it felt heavy in my palm, weighted with implications I hadn't understood. "Got it," I said, holding it up. "Good. Anything else? Documents, photos, anything your father might have left you?" I looked around the small bedroom, thinking about the boxes of his belongings I'd stored, the few photos I'd kept out, the books on my shelf that had been his. "There's a photo album," I said, moving to the closet, "and some of his old military things. I don't know if any of it matters." "Bring it," Logan said, checking his watch. 3 minutes. I grabbed the album and a small wooden box that contained my father's dog tags and some ribbons from his service. As I turned back toward the door, something caught my eye. A book on my nightstand. One of my father's old paperback mysteries that I'd been reading before bed. It was positioned differently than I'd left it. The bookmark moved forward several pages. "Logan," I said quietly, my heart rate spiking. "Someone's been here since last night." They moved things. He was beside me in 2 strides, his hand moving inside his jacket to where I was certain he kept a gun. "How do you know?" "This book. I'm very particular about my bookmarks." Someone moved it forward, probably flipped through the pages looking for hidden notes or papers. I scanned the room more carefully now, seeing other small signs. The closet door not quite closed all the way. A drawer slightly more open than I'd left it. They came back. They're being more thorough. "Then we need to leave now," Logan said, taking my arm. "They might still be nearby, watching to see if you return." We moved quickly through the apartment, Logan's body positioned protectively between me and the door. Jin-ho was waiting in the stairwell, and something about his tense posture told me he'd spotted something concerning. He spoke rapid Korean to Logan, gesturing toward the floor below. "2 men," Logan translated for me. "Second floor, trying to look casual but watching your door. We need to go up, not down." "Up where?" I asked, but he was already pulling me toward the stairs leading to the 4th floor. "There's only 1 more floor, and then the roof." "Exactly," Logan said grimly. We climbed as quietly as possible, though my breathing was already labored from the exertion and stress. The 4th floor hallway was empty, and Logan led us to the roof access door at the end. It should have been locked, but Jin-ho had it open in seconds with tools that looked disturbingly professional. The roof was flat and cluttered with HVAC equipment and old satellite dishes. The October wind was stronger up here, cutting through my sweater and making me shiver. Logan pulled out his phone, speaking urgently in Korean while Jin-ho positioned himself at the roof access, watching for pursuit. "There's a building next door," Logan said, ending his call. "Same height. We can cross and go down through their stairwell. My people are bringing a car around to the other street." I looked at the gap between buildings, maybe 4 feet of empty air above a 30-foot drop to the alley below. "You cannot be serious. I'm 6 months pregnant." "And you'll be dead if those men catch you," Logan said bluntly. "They're not here to talk, Lila. They're here to take you somewhere private and make you tell them everything you know. Can you make the jump?" Could I? I'd never been particularly athletic, and pregnancy had shifted my center of gravity in ways that made even walking sometimes precarious. But the alternative was being captured by men who would hurt me to get information I barely understood. I thought about my baby, about the life growing inside me that depended on me making the right choices, no matter how terrifying. "I can make it," I said, hoping I was telling the truth. Logan went first, making the jump look effortless with his long legs and athletic build. He turned and held out his arms. "I'll catch you if you slip, but you won't slip. Just don't look down, focus on me, and jump." I backed up a few steps, trying not to think about what would happen if I miscalculated. The roof access door burst open behind us, and Jin-ho shouted a warning in Korean. No more time to think. I ran forward and jumped, my arms windmilling as I cleared the gap. My feet hit the other roof and I stumbled forward, but Logan's hands were there, catching me and pulling me away from the edge. "Good," he said, already moving. "This way." Jin-ho made the jump behind us, just as 2 men emerged onto my building's roof. They shouted something I didn't catch, but the meaning was clear. They'd found us. We ran for the roof access of the new building, my lungs burning and my legs shaking with adrenaline. Jin-ho reached it first, yanking the door open and ushering us through. The stairwell was dim and smelled of mildew, but we descended quickly, taking stairs 2 at a time. My hand stayed on the railing, the other clutching the photo album and wooden box to my chest. Behind us, I could hear the heavy footfalls of pursuit, the men who'd been watching my apartment now chasing us through this stranger's building. We burst out onto the street level, emerging into a different block than my own. A black car was waiting, and Logan pushed me toward it, while Jinho turned to face our pursuers. I saw him pull a gun from beneath his jacket, and then Logan was shoving me into the back seat and climbing in after me. "Drive," he commanded in Korean, and the car surged forward. I twisted in my seat, watching through the rear window as Jinho held off the two men, his gun raised but not firing, giving us time to escape. "What about Jinho?" I asked, fear for him mixing with fear for myself. "He knows what he's doing," Logan said, though tension lined his face. "He'll lose them and meet us at the storage unit." The car wove through Queens traffic with practiced efficiency, our driver taking random turns and doubling back to ensure we weren't followed. My heart was still racing, my hands shaking as the adrenaline slowly faded. I'd just jumped between buildings. I'd just been chased by armed men. This was my life now, and the absurdity of it was almost worse than the danger. "Are you hurt?" Logan asked, his hand reaching out as if to check me over before stopping himself. "The baby?" "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. My body ached everywhere, and I could feel the baby moving in what seemed like agitation, responding to my elevated stress hormones. "Who were those men?" "I don't know yet," Logan admitted, his jaw tight with anger. "But someone is moving faster than I expected. They must have surveillance on your building, waiting for you to return. The question is how they knew to watch for you specifically." "The men from the club last night," I said, the pieces clicking together. "They told someone about me, about my father." "Probably." Logan pulled out his phone, checking messages. "Which means we're running out of time. More people will be looking for you now, and some of them won't be as careful about keeping you alive." The driver spoke in Korean, and Logan responded, then turned to me. "We're 20 minutes from the storage facility. Tell me exactly what we're looking for once we're inside." I tried to remember the last time I'd been there, over a year ago when I'd first moved my father's belongings. Boxes, mostly. Clothes, books, papers from his office. I didn't go through most of it. I just wanted it out of my apartment because seeing his things every day was too painful. "Did he ever give you any specific instructions about the storage unit? Anything that seemed odd or overly detailed?" I thought back to the conversation we'd had when he'd first rented the space, about 6 months before he died. At the time, I'd thought he was just being practical, wanting to downsize his apartment and store things he didn't use regularly. But now, with everything I knew, the conversation took on a different meaning. "He told me the code was my birthday," I said slowly. "And he said if anything ever happened to him, I should go through everything in the unit carefully. He said there might be things I'd need, things that would help me understand who he really was." My voice cracked slightly. I thought he was just being morbid, talking about his death. I didn't realize he knew someone was going to kill him. Logan's expression softened marginally. "He was trying to protect you the only way he could, by leaving you information that would give you leverage, power. He knew that knowledge could be a weapon or a shield, depending on how you used it." "I don't want it to be either," I said bitterly. "I just want my life back. I want to work and save money for my baby, and not have to worry about organized crime and corrupt FBI agents, and people chasing me across rooftops." "I know," Logan said quietly. "But that's not the hand you were dealt. Your father made choices that put you in this position, whether he intended to or not. Now you have to make choices about how to survive it." The car pulled up in front of a large storage facility in a more industrial part of Queens, the kind of place with rows of identical orange doors and security cameras monitoring every entrance. Logan studied the building carefully before allowing us to exit the vehicle. "Stay close to me," he instructed. If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. Understanding?" I nodded, clutching my father's key so tightly the metal bit into my palm. We walked through the main entrance, past a bored attendant who barely looked up from his phone, and into the maze of storage corridors. My father's unit was 3127, on the 3rd floor of the climate-controlled section. Each step felt heavy with significance, like I was walking toward a door that, once opened, could never be closed again. The unit was in a corner, isolated from most of the others. Logan checked the surrounding area while I approached the door, my hands shaking as I entered the code. My birthday, just like my father had said. The keypad beeped and the lock disengaged with a heavy click. "Ready?" Logan asked, his hand resting on the door handle. Was I ready to see what my father had left me? Ready to understand what he'd been involved in? What had gotten him killed? Ready to accept that the man who'd raised me had lived a life full of secrets and danger that I'd never suspected? No. I wasn't ready. But ready or not, I had to know. "Open it," I said. Logan rolled up the door, and we both stood staring at the contents of the storage unit. Boxes were stacked neatly along the walls, labeled in my father's careful handwriting. Clothes, books, army records, kitchen items. But in the center of the space was something that made my breath catch. A large safe, the kind that would require a combination or key to open, sitting like a silent sentinel guarding my father's most important secrets. "That wasn't here last time," I whispered. "When I stored his things, that safe wasn't here." Logan stepped inside, examining the safe without touching it. He must have added it later, before he died. "This is what they're looking for, Lila. Whatever evidence your father collected, whatever files could expose corruption and criminal operations, it's in there." I stared at the safe, feeling the weight of my father's legacy pressing down on me. Inside that metal box was information that people would kill for, that had already gotten my father murdered. Once I opened it, there would be no pretending I didn't know, no claiming ignorance. I would become a player in this dangerous game whether I wanted to or not. "Do you know the combination?" Logan asked. I did. Or at least, I thought I did. My father had been methodical about his important numbers, using patterns I'd learned over years of living with him. I approached the safe and knelt down in front of it, ignoring the protest from my pregnant body. My fingers moved across the dial, entering a combination that represented the day we'd become a family, the day he'd officially adopted me and given me his name. The safe clicked open. Inside were hard drives, at least a dozen of them, each labeled with codes I didn't understand. There were also files, physical documents in folders marked with dates and operation names. And on top of everything else, sealed in plastic, was a letter with my name on it in my father's handwriting. "Lila," Logan breathed, seeing the contents. "Your father was more thorough than anyone realized. This is everything. Years of evidence, testimony, documentation. This could bring down entire networks." I reached for the letter with trembling hands, breaking the seal and unfolding the paper. My father's words swam before my eyes as tears blurred my vision. "My dearest Lila, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you found what I left for you. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Sorry for the secrets. Sorry for the danger this might bring to your door. Sorry that I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. But I need you to understand that everything I did, every risk I took, was because I believed in making the world safer for you. The files in this safe contain evidence of corruption within the FBI and connections between law enforcement and organized crime. They represent 15 years of work, and they're my insurance policy. If something happens to me, these files are your protection. They give you leverage, power to negotiate your safety. Don't try to be a hero, sweetheart. Don't try to expose everything yourself. Use them to survive, to protect yourself, and any family you build. That's all I ever wanted, for you to be safe and happy. I love you more than I can express, and I'm proud of the strong, intelligent woman you've become. Trust your instincts. Be careful who you trust, and know that whatever happens, you have the strength to survive it. You're my daughter, and you're stronger than you know. All my love. Always, Dad. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it against my chest, letting the tears fall freely now. He'd known. He'd known they would kill him, and he'd spent his final months making sure I'd have what I needed to survive. Not justice, not exposure, just survival. That had been his final gift to me. Lila, Logan said gently, we need to take everything and leave. If those men find this location, we can't be here. I nodded numbly, helping him load the hard drives and files into a large bag Jinho had brought. The safe empty now, its secrets no longer hidden, but also no longer safe. I'd crossed the point of no return. I was William Morrison's daughter in more than just name now. I was his heir, his legacy, the keeper of his most dangerous secrets. And somehow, I had to figure out how to survive it. The safe house in Brooklyn felt different when we returned with my father's files, as if the weight of the secrets we carried had somehow changed the atmosphere itself. Logan had Jinho sweep the entire warehouse for surveillance devices while we spread the contents of the safe across the large dining table. 12 hard drives, 7 thick folders of documents, and my father's letter, which I'd tucked carefully into my pocket where it rested against my heart like a talisman. We need to know what we're dealing with before we can formulate a plan, Logan said, booting up a laptop that looked far more sophisticated than anything I'd ever seen in an electronics store. These hard drives are encrypted, but I have people who can crack them. The physical documents we can start reviewing now. I sat down heavily in one of the chairs, exhaustion and stress catching up with me all at once. My body ached from jumping between buildings and running downstairs, and the baby was moving restlessly, as if sensing my agitation. What kind of plan? I asked, my hand moving to rest on my stomach in that unconscious protective gesture. My father said to use these files for survival, not exposure. What does that even mean? Logan looked up from the laptop, his dark eyes serious. It means we identify who's implicated in these files, who has the most to lose if the information becomes public. Then we approach them with a deal. They leave you alone, permanently, and the files stay buried. If anything happens to you, everything goes public automatically. That's extortion, I said, though the word felt inadequate for what he was describing. It's survival, Logan corrected. Your father understood that sometimes the threat of exposure is more powerful than actual exposure. If everything went public tomorrow, chaos would ensue. Investigations, arrests, trials. But the people at the top would have time to destroy evidence, create alibis, disappear. The smart play is to make them believe the sword of Damocles is hanging over their heads permanently, that their only safety lies in ensuring yours. It was a cold, calculating strategy, one that required trusting that fear would be enough to keep dangerous people at bay. But what choice did I have? I was 6 months pregnant, alone except for the criminal organization currently protecting me, and in possession of information that people had already killed for. Show me what's in the files, I said. I need to understand what my father died for. Logan handed me the first folder, labeled Operation Silk Road, 2015-2018. Inside were pages of careful documentation, photographs, transaction records, and handwritten notes in my father's precise script. As I read, a picture emerged of a massive money laundering operation that moved funds from various Korean criminal enterprises through legitimate businesses in New York and New Jersey. But what made it devastating was the FBI involvement. 3 agents were named specifically, including their badge numbers and detailed accounts of bribes they'd received, evidence they'd destroyed, and raids they'd sabotaged. This would destroy careers, I said, scanning through the documentation. These agents, if this went public, they'd go to prison. Keep reading, Logan said quietly. I turned the page and felt my blood run cold. One of the agents named in the file was Marcus Chen, currently the special agent in charge of the New York field office. Not just a corrupt agent, but someone who'd risen through the ranks while taking bribes and protecting criminals. The implications were staggering. Your father was playing an extremely dangerous game, Logan said, watching my reaction. He wasn't just documenting corruption, he was documenting corruption at the highest levels. People with the power to make investigations disappear, to manipulate evidence, to order killings and make them look like accidents or suicides. I moved to the next folder, then the next, each one revealing another operation, another network of corruption. My father had spent 15 years patiently collecting evidence, building an unassailable case against not just individual criminals, but the system that protected them. Operation Jade Tiger documented drug trafficking. Operation Golden Phoenix detailed human smuggling. Operation Red Dragon exposed arms dealing. Each file implicated both criminal organizations and the law enforcement officials who enabled them. How many people are named in here? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what I was holding. Logan had been reviewing documents on the laptop, cross-referencing names and organizations. Preliminary count: about 47 individuals from various criminal organizations and 16 law enforcement officials, ranging from local police to FBI to customs agents. Your father was thorough to the point of obsession. He wanted to make sure there was no wiggle room, I said, understanding my father's methodology now. No way for them to claim the evidence was circumstantial or unreliable. He documented everything, multiple sources, corroborating testimony, financial records, which makes it valuable beyond measure, Logan said, but also incredibly dangerous. These files don't just threaten individuals, they threaten entire organizations. The people running these operations can't afford to let this information exist, let alone fall into the wrong hands. My phone buzzed suddenly, making both of us jump. I pulled it out, seeing a text from an unknown number. The message made my stomach drop. We know you have the files. We know you're with Park Jin-woo. You have 48 hours to turn everything over, or people you care about start dying. We'll start with your friend Jenna when she returns from Europe next week. Logan, I said, my voice shaking as I handed him the phone. They know. They know everything. His expression darkened as he read the message. They've been tracking us more closely than I realized. This is sophisticated surveillance, not just following your movements but monitoring your communications, your relationships. He stood abruptly, pulling out his own phone. I need to increase security immediately and get protection on anyone you're close to. I don't have many people, I said, thinking about my limited social circle. Jenna's really my only close friend. My parents and I are estranged. I don't have siblings. The baby's father is gone. The loneliness of it hit me suddenly, how isolated I'd become in the past few years. But Jenna, she can't become a target because of me. She doesn't know anything about this. That won't matter to them, Logan said, already making calls in rapid Korean. She's leverage, a way to force your compliance. We need to warn her, get her somewhere safe until this is resolved. She's in Paris for work, I said, pulling up our text thread to check her latest message. Some kind of architecture conference. She's supposed to be back next Tuesday. Logan spoke urgently into the phone, giving instructions I only partially understood. When he finished, he turned back to me. I have contacts in Paris who can provide protection until we can arrange safer travel for her. But, Lila, you need to understand something. This threat, it means we're running out of time. Whoever sent this message, they're not interested in negotiation yet. They're establishing dominance, showing you they can reach anyone you care about. Then what do we do? I was trying to keep the panic out of my voice and failing. How do we protect everyone while also protecting ourselves? We accelerate the timeline, Logan said, returning to the laptop. Instead of taking weeks to analyze these files and identify every player, we focus on the biggest threats, the people with the most power and the most to lose. We approach them first with our deal, use them to apply pressure on the others. Marcus Chen, I said, the name feeling like poison on my tongue. The FBI agent who's now in charge of the New York field office. He's in multiple files, involved in multiple operations. If we can neutralize him, that eliminates a huge threat. Logan nodded slowly. He's also the most dangerous person to approach. He has enormous resources at his disposal, both legitimate and criminal. If we play this wrong, he could have us killed and make it look justified. But if we play it right, I pressed, leaning forward. If we give him no choice but to accept our deal, then he becomes our biggest asset, Logan admitted. Someone in his position, protecting us from the inside, would make everyone else fall in line. No one wants to move against someone the FBI special agent in charge is protecting. It was a terrifying strategy, relying on the cooperation of a corrupt official who'd already proven willing to kill to protect his secrets. But as I looked at the files spread across the table, at the evidence my father had died collecting, I understood that this was exactly what he'd intended. Not public exposure that would create chaos, but private leverage that would create safety. How do we approach him? I asked. We can't just call and say we have evidence of his corruption. Logan thought for a moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm that suggested he was working through scenarios. We need a neutral location, somewhere public enough that he can't simply have us eliminated, but private enough for frank conversation. And we need insurance, something that guarantees even if the meeting goes wrong, the files still go public. A dead man's switch, I said, remembering the term from thriller novels. Something that automatically releases the files if we don't check in regularly. Exactly. Logan pulled up a new screen on his laptop. I have secure servers that can be configured for exactly this purpose. We upload copies of everything, set up the dead man switch, and make sure Chen knows that killing us only accelerates his exposure, not prevents it. We spent the next several hours working through the details. Logan's technical people arrived, serious-faced men and women who handled the hard drives with careful precision, cracking encryptions and creating backup systems. I read through more files, my horror growing with each page at the scope of corruption my father had uncovered. He hadn't just found a few bad apples, he'd exposed an entire rotten orchard, a system where criminality and law enforcement had become so intertwined they were barely distinguishable. Around 9 o'clock, Jin-ho returned with food, some kind of Korean takeout that smelled amazing despite my stress-dampened appetite. Logan insisted I eat, watching with satisfaction as I worked through kimchi fried rice and beef bulgogi that was better than anything I'd had at the Sovereign. You need to keep your strength up, he said, his tone softer than usual. This is going to get harder before it gets better. You keep saying things like that, I observed, setting down my chopsticks. Taking care of me, worrying about the baby, making sure I eat. Why? You're a criminal. Your entire business is built on the kind of activity my father spent his life fighting. Why do you care what happens to me? Logan was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Your father and I met 3 times, he said finally. Formal meetings, negotiations about information he had that I wanted buried. He could have used that information to destroy me, but instead he made a deal. He'd keep quiet about certain operations in exchange for me steering clear of activities that directly harmed innocent people. Drug dealing to addicts, human trafficking, anything involving children or extreme violence. He made you promise to be a better criminal? I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. He made me see that there were lines worth respecting, Logan corrected. That not all criminal activity is equal. That some things are unforgivable even in our world. He changed how I do business, what operations I'll participate in and which I won't. When I heard he'd died, I suspected it wasn't natural causes. And when I met you last night and realized you were walking around completely unaware of the danger you were in, I knew I owed him the debt of protecting you. That's it? I asked. You're doing this out of obligation to a dead informant who made you promise to be slightly less terrible? Logan's jaw tightened. I'm doing this because your father was a good man in a world full of bad ones, and because you're an innocent person caught in something you didn't choose. And yes, because I respect the courage it took to call me out last night when you knew it could cost you everything. His dark eyes met mine. You remind me of him, actually. That same stubborn integrity, that refusal to bow down even when it's the smart move. The compliment caught me off guard, making my cheeks warm. My father would hate that I'm accepting help from you. He'd tell me to go to the FBI, to trust the system. The system killed him, Logan said bluntly. The FBI he trusted was compromised by the very corruption he was trying to expose. If you go to them now, you're just as likely to end up dead as you are to get protection. At least with me, you know exactly what you're dealing with. He had a point, though I hated to admit it. The devil you know versus the devil you don't, and in this case, the institutional devil had already proven itself lethal to my father. One of Logan's technical people approached, a young woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. She spoke in Korean, and I caught enough to understand that the dead man's switch was configured and ready. Everything was backed up in multiple locations, and the system would automatically release all files to major media outlets and law enforcement agencies if we didn't check in every 48 hours. It's done, Logan confirmed, switching to English for my benefit. The trap is set. Now we just need to bait it. How do we contact Chen? I asked. We can't go through official FBI channels. We don't need to, Logan said, pulling up a file on his laptop. Your father's notes include several ways Chen can be contacted off the books. Phone numbers, encrypted email addresses, even a physical location where he conducts business that the FBI doesn't know about. We send a message requesting a meeting, make it clear what we have, and let him come to us. And if he refuses? I asked. If he decides it's easier to just hunt us down? Then the files go public and he goes to prison, Logan said simply. He's smart enough to recognize when he's lost, when cooperation is his only option. The question is whether he'll try to eliminate us after making a deal, which is why the dead man's switch is so important. It has to be foolproof. We drafted the message together, carefully worded to convey both the threat and the opportunity. By midnight, it was sent through 3 different channels to ensure Chen received it. Now all we could do was wait for his response. I was exhausted beyond measure, my body aching and my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. Logan set me up in one of the bedrooms, this one more comfortable than the couch I'd slept on the previous night, with a real bed and soft blankets. As I changed into borrowed pajamas, I caught sight of myself in the mirror above the dresser. I looked different than I had 24 hours ago. Older somehow. Harder. The naive waitress who'd thought her biggest problem was unpaid rent had been burned away, leaving someone who understood the true stakes of survival in a world where power and corruption intertwined so completely they were indistinguishable. My hand moved to my stomach, feeling the baby shift and settle. I'm sorry, I whispered to the life growing inside me. I'm sorry this is the world you're being born into, that your mother is mixed up in things that should never have touched us. But I promise you, I'll survive this. We'll survive this. And somehow, we'll build something better from the ashes. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting Logan with some update. But it was Jinho who entered, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. He spoke in Korean, his words slow enough for me to follow. Logan asked me to check if you need anything. He's still working on security arrangements for your friend. I'm okay, I replied in Korean, grateful for the chance to use the language my father had taught me. Thank you for everything you did today. Getting us out of that building, protecting us. Jinho nodded, a small smile touching his lips. Your Korean is very good. Better than most Americans who study it. My father was an excellent teacher, I said, feeling the familiar ache of loss. He made sure I understood not just the words, but the culture behind them, the respect and hierarchy built into every interaction. He taught you well, Jinho agreed. Logan says you have your father's courage too. That's rare, especially now. He hesitated, then added, We'll keep you safe, you and the baby. Logan has given orders. Anyone who wants to get to you has to go through all of us first. The promise should have felt empty, coming from criminals who'd admitted to operating outside the law. But somehow, in that moment, it felt more solid than any promise the legitimate authorities could have made. These were people who understood the real threats, who operated in the same shadows as those hunting me. Thank you, I said again, meaning it more deeply this time. Jinho left, and I climbed into bed. Though I doubted sleep would come easily, my phone sat on the nightstand, and I found myself composing a text to Jenna, trying to warn her without revealing too much. Hey, something's come up. I need you to be really careful when you get back to New York. Don't go home right away. Call me first. It's important. I know this sounds crazy, but please trust me. I hit send, knowing it wasn't enough, but not knowing what else to say. How do you tell your best friend that she's become a target in a game she didn't know existed? Sleep eventually found me despite my racing thoughts, pulling me down into dreams of my father, of the kitchen table where he'd taught me Korean while drinking coffee from his favorite mug. In the dream, he looked at me with pride and sadness mixed together. You're stronger than you know, sweetheart, he said, the same words from his letter. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the people who seem most dangerous are the ones willing to protect you when no one else can. I woke once in the night to the sound of voices speaking Korean in the other room, Logan coordinating with his people about security arrangements and contingency plans. The sound should have been ominous, a reminder of the criminal world I'd fallen into. Instead, it was oddly comforting, proof that I wasn't alone in this fight. When I finally fell back asleep, my dreams were quieter, less fraught, and my hand, resting on my stomach where my baby grew, felt steadier than it had in days. Tomorrow we would hear from Marcus Chen. Tomorrow the real negotiation would begin. But tonight, for a few stolen hours, I let myself rest in the eye of the storm. Marcus Chen's response came at 6:30 in the morning, delivered through an encrypted message that appeared on Logan's laptop with a soft chime that woke me from uneasy sleep. I emerged from the bedroom to find Logan already dressed and alert, as if he'd never slept at all, studying the message with an expression I couldn't quite read. He wants to meet, Logan said without preamble. Tonight, 8 o'clock, at the Pearson Gallery in Chelsea. It's a private art opening. Lots of witnesses, but enough privacy for conversation. He's being smart about it, choosing a location where violence would be too public, but where he also has the advantage of familiar territory. I poured myself a cup of the coffee Logan had already brewed, then remembered I was supposed to avoid caffeine and switch to water instead. How do you know he has the advantage there? Because Marcus Chen is a serious art collector, Logan explained, pulling up information on his laptop. He's on the board of 3 galleries in New York, and has been known to use art events for conducting business that shouldn't happen in FBI offices. The Pearson Gallery, specifically, has been linked to several money laundering investigations that mysteriously went nowhere. It's his territory. So we're walking into a trap, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We're walking into a negotiation, Logan corrected. There's a difference. Chen knows we have leverage. The dead man's switch means killing us only accelerates his exposure. He wants to see if we're serious, if we really have what we claim, and whether a deal is possible. This meeting is about establishing terms. And if he doesn't like our terms? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Logan's expression was grim. Then things get much more complicated, but I don't think it'll come to that. Chen survived this long by being pragmatic. He'll recognize that cooperating with us is his best option. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Logan's people brought clothes for the evening, explaining that we needed to look like we belonged at a high-end art opening. For me, that meant a black maternity dress that was elegant without being overly formal, paired with flat shoes that would let me move quickly if necessary. Logan wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my former salary, his appearance that of a successful businessman rather than a criminal. "Your father's files stay here," Logan instructed as we prepared to leave. "Encrypted and secure. We bring tablets with samples, enough to prove what we have, but not enough that Chen could simply take them and eliminate the threat. Everything is calculated, every advantage preserved." Jinho drove us into Manhattan as evening fell, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. The Pearson Gallery was in a converted warehouse in Chelsea, all industrial chic with exposed brick and modern lighting. Well-dressed people were already arriving for the opening, couples and small groups chatting as they entered. We looked like just another pair of attendees, though Logan's security team was scattered throughout the area, watching for threats I couldn't see. "Stay close to me," Logan murmured as we approached the entrance. "If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. Your safety is more important than this negotiation." The gallery interior was stunning. 3 floors of open space with artwork displayed on white walls and pedestals. The current exhibition was focused on contemporary Korean artists, which explained Chen's interest. We moved through the crowd, Logan's hand resting lightly on my lower back, in a gesture that looked protective and possessive at once. I found myself hyper-aware of his presence, the solid warmth of him beside me, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room for threats. Marcus Chen found us on the 2nd floor, standing before a large abstract painting that somehow managed to be both violent and beautiful. He was shorter than I'd expected, maybe 5'8", with silver-streaked hair and the kind of expensive grooming that spoke of wealth and status. His suit was impeccable, his smile practiced and cold. "Mr. Park," he said in accented English, extending his hand. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "Special Agent Chen?" Logan replied, shaking his hand with just enough pressure to acknowledge the implicit power struggle. "May I introduce Lila Morrison? I believe you know her father's work." Chen's eyes moved to me, and I saw calculation there, assessment of threat and opportunity. "Miss Morrison, I was sorry to hear about your father's death. He was a dedicated public servant." "He was murdered," I said quietly, refusing to let him hide behind euphemisms. "By people who were supposed to be on the same side as him." Something flickered in Chen's expression. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or warning. "These are serious accusations. I hope you have evidence to support them." "We have evidence to support a great many things," Logan said smoothly. "Perhaps we should find somewhere more private to discuss specifics." Chen gestured toward a corner office visible through glass walls, currently empty. "The gallery director's office. She's a friend, she won't mind." The casual mention of friendship was clearly meant to remind us whose territory we were on, who had advantages here. The office was small but elegantly appointed, with a desk and several comfortable chairs arranged around it. Chen closed the door behind us, and suddenly the ambient noise of the gallery faded to a distant murmur. We were alone with a man who had the power to order our deaths and make them look justified. Logan pulled out a tablet and set it on the desk. William Morrison spent 15 years documenting corruption within the FBI and connections between law enforcement and organized crime. These files represent his complete work, names, dates, transactions, communications, everything needed to destroy careers and send people to prison for decades. Chen's face remained impassive as Logan scrolled through samples, but I saw his hands tighten slightly on the arms of his chair. "This is impressive work," he said finally, "but also incredibly dangerous. Possessing this information makes you targets for everyone named in these files." "Which is why we're here," I said, finding my voice. "We're not interested in exposure or justice or revenge. We're interested in survival. My father left me these files as insurance, and I intend to use them exactly that way." "What are you proposing?" Chen asked, his attention fully on me now. "Protection," I said simply. "Complete protection for me, my baby, and anyone I designate. No attempts on our lives, no harassment, no threats. In exchange, these files stay buried. They never go public, never get used against anyone named in them." "And if I refuse?" Chen's voice was deceptively mild. "If I decide it's easier to simply eliminate the threat you represent." Logan leaned forward, his voice hard. "Then a dead man's switch activates, and every file gets sent to major media outlets, congressional oversight committees, and the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. Your career ends. Your freedom ends. Everything you've built gets destroyed. The only way these files stay buried is if we're alive and safe to maintain them." Chen was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and moved to the window, looking out at the gallery below where people moved between artworks, oblivious to the negotiation happening above them. "Your father was an idealist," he said quietly. "He believed the system could be fixed, that exposure of corruption would lead to reform and justice. But he was wrong. Systems don't fix themselves, they protect themselves. The people named in these files, they're not anomalies, they're how the system actually functions." "I'm not my father," I said, standing as well despite Logan's warning look. "I don't care about fixing the system or achieving justice. I just want to raise my baby without looking over my shoulder constantly. That's all." "Is that really too much to ask?" Chen turned back to face me, and for the first time, I saw something like respect in his eyes. "No," he said. "It's not too much to ask. But you need to understand what you're proposing. Complete protection means bringing you into the system, making you untouchable. That requires cooperation from multiple organizations, agreements between people who are usually enemies. It's complicated and expensive. Then it's a good thing these files give us leverage with multiple organizations," Logan said. "We're not just asking for your protection, Special Agent Chen. We're asking you to broker a deal between everyone who's implicated. They all agree to leave Lila alone, permanently, or they all go down together." "A mutual assured destruction pact," Chen mused, "enforced by the threat of exposure if any party breaks it. It's elegant, actually. Dangerous, but elegant." He returned to his seat, his expression thoughtful. "It could work, but it requires trust, and trust is in short supply in our world." "Then we start building it," I said. "Right here, right now. You agree to protect me and mine, you broker deals with the others, and we give you something in return. Information about operations your competitors are running, heads up about investigations that might actually threaten people you need to protect. We become an asset instead of a threat." Logan looked at me sharply, clearly not having anticipated this additional offer. But I could see Chen considering it, recognizing the value of having access to William Morrison's intelligence network, even secondhand through his daughter. "You would share information?" Chen asked carefully. "Information that could harm people in these files?" "Selectively," I clarified. "Not exposure, just intelligence. The kind of thing that helps you manage situations, avoid problems, maintain control. My father understood the value of information as currency. I'm willing to continue that tradition if it keeps me safe." Chen smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from cold bureaucrat to something almost human. "You're more like your father than you think. He always understood that the real power wasn't in destroying people. It was in making them need you." He stood and extended his hand. "I accept your terms. I'll broker protection agreements with everyone named in the files. In exchange, you maintain the dead man's switch, but also provide intelligence when requested. And nobody on any side touches you or yours. Deal? I looked at Logan, who gave a small nod. Then I shook Chen's hand, sealing an agreement that would tie me to the criminal underworld and corrupt law enforcement for the rest of my life. Deal, I said. The next hour was spent working through details, establishing communication protocols and contingency plans. Chen made calls on encrypted phones, speaking to people I didn't know in languages I sometimes couldn't follow. But the message was clear. Lila Morrison was under protection, untouchable, and anyone who violated that agreement would face consequences from every organization simultaneously. By the time we left the gallery, I was exhausted, but also strangely lighter. The immediate threat had been neutralized. I wasn't safe exactly, but I was protected, which was as close to safety as someone in my position could get. That was brilliant, Logan said as we walked to the car, his hand still resting protectively on my back. Offering to share intelligence, making yourself valuable instead of just threatening exposure. Your father would have been proud. My father would have been horrified, I corrected. He fought against this world his entire life, and now I've just agreed to become part of it. You agreed to survive, Logan said gently. That's what he wanted most, for you to survive and be safe. Everything else is secondary. Jinho drove us back to Brooklyn, and I watched Manhattan disappear behind us, feeling like I was leaving behind the last remnants of my old life. The woman who'd worked at the Sovereign, who'd worried about rent and morning sickness, she was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd made deals with criminals and corrupt officials to protect herself and her baby. The warehouse felt like a refuge when we arrived, warm and secure after the tension of the gallery. Logan's people had prepared food, and we ate in comfortable silence, both too tired for extensive conversation. But as the evening wore on, and his team gradually left until it was just the two of us, the atmosphere shifted into something I couldn't quite name. What happens now? I asked, curled up on the couch with tea warming my hands. The immediate threat is handled, but I can't hide in this warehouse forever. Eventually, I need to figure out an actual life. Logan sat down beside me, closer than was strictly necessary. You'll need a new identity, background, cover story that explains where you've been and why you disappeared. I have people who can arrange that. A new apartment in a safer neighborhood, legitimate income from a consulting job that doesn't actually require you to do anything. Protection that's invisible, but constant. A golden cage, I said. Better than the alternative, but still a cage. Maybe, Logan acknowledged. Or maybe it's freedom. Freedom from fear, from constant looking over your shoulder, from wondering if today is the day someone finds you. Your father's files bought you that freedom, even if it came at a cost. I studied his face in the soft lighting, seeing past the dangerous criminal to the man underneath. Why are you really doing this? I asked. And don't tell me it's just obligation to my father. There's something else. He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying me with that intensity I was beginning to recognize as his natural state. You intrigue me, he said finally. Your courage, your intelligence, the way you adapted to impossible circumstances instead of falling apart. Most people in your situation would have crumbled. You negotiated. I'm terrified, I admitted. I've been terrified since the moment you grabbed my wrist at the club. I'm just good at hiding it. That's the courage I'm talking about, Logan said softly. Being terrified and functioning anyway. Making smart choices even when you're scared. That's rare. His hand moved almost unconsciously to rest on my stomach where the baby shifted. And you're going to be a mother. That life you're protecting, it deserves someone who will fight for it the way you have. The touch sent unexpected warmth through me, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sexuality and everything to do with connection. This man, this criminal who should have been my enemy, had become my protector, my ally, maybe even something more. "Logan," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What are we doing here? What is this becoming?" He moved his hand from my stomach to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheek in a gesture so tender it made my breath catch. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I want to keep you safe. I know seeing you in danger makes something in me react violently. And I know that when this is all settled and you're secure, I'm going to have to figure out how to walk away from you because you deserve better than a life tied to someone like me. What if I don't want you to walk away?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them, revealing a truth I hadn't fully admitted to myself. Logan's eyes darkened with something that might have been longing or might have been pain. "Then we're both in trouble," he said quietly. "Because I'm not good for you, Lila. I'm not the happy ending your father would have wanted." "My father wanted me to survive," I said, echoing his earlier words. "Maybe he also wanted me to find someone who would fight for me the way he did. Someone who would protect what matters most." "Even if that someone is a criminal?" Logan asked, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Even if being with me means living in the shadows permanently?" I thought about it. Really thought about what I was considering. A life with Logan would mean accepting his world, the violence and moral ambiguity that came with it. But it would also mean safety for my baby, protection from threats I couldn't fight alone, and something else I was afraid to name. Connection, understanding, maybe even love, if I was brave enough to let it develop. "My father made peace with your world," I said finally. "He learned to work within it, to find honor among people everyone else would call dishonorable. Maybe I can do the same." Logan leaned forward slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. But I didn't want to. When his lips met mine, the kiss was gentle and careful, mindful of everything I was carrying. It tasted like possibility and danger mixed together, like choosing a path that couldn't be unchosen. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. "Probably," I agreed, "but I've made worse decisions in the last 48 hours. He laughed then, a real laugh that transformed his face into something younger and less guarded. "Fair point. Compared to jumping between buildings while pregnant and negotiating with corrupt FBI agents, dating a criminal seems almost reasonable." "Dating?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're doing?" "If you'll have me," Logan said seriously. "With all the complications and danger and impossibility that comes with it. I can't promise you normal or safe or easy, but I can promise you that I'll protect you and your baby with everything I have, that I'll never lie to you about what I am or what my world entails, and that if you choose this, choose me, I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of that choice." It was perhaps the most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. No pretty lies about happily ever after. No promises that couldn't be kept. Just truth, raw and complicated and real. "I choose this," I said, my hand covering his where it still rested on my stomach. "I choose you. God help us both." Logan kissed me again, deeper this time, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled since my father's death. Not happiness, exactly, but rightness. The sense that despite everything, despite the impossible circumstances and dangerous world I'd fallen into, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We spent that night talking, planning a future that neither of us had expected. A new identity for me that would let me live openly without constant threat. A role for me in Logan's organization, using my father's analytical skills and language abilities to help manage information and relationships. A life that would be unconventional and complicated, but also protected, and, in its own strange way, free. The baby kicked as dawn approached, a reminder of the life depending on my choices. I placed Logan's hand over the movement, letting him feel the flutter of tiny limbs. "She's strong," he said softly, "like her mother." "You think it's a girl?" I asked, smiling. "I hope it's a girl," Logan admitted. "The world needs more women like you, brave and smart and unwilling to accept injustice." "The world needs more men like my father," I countered. "And maybe, just maybe, like you're trying to become." He pulled me closer, and I rested my head on his shoulder, exhausted, but also more at peace than I'd been in months. Outside, the sun was rising over Brooklyn, painting the warehouse windows with golden light. A new day, a new beginning, a new life emerging from the ashes of everything that had been destroyed. My father had given me the tools to survive. Logan had given me the protection to build a life, and my baby would be born into a world where love and danger existed side by side, where the line between right and wrong wasn't always clear, but where fierce protection and loyalty meant everything. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined for myself when I'd walked into the Sovereign for my shift 2 nights ago. But as Logan's arms tightened around me and my baby kicked against our joined hands, I realized it might be exactly the ending I needed. Sometimes survival meant accepting help from unexpected places. Sometimes protection came from the people everyone else feared. And sometimes love grew in the darkest places, not despite the danger, but because of it. Because facing death together revealed what truly mattered. I'd entered the criminal underworld as William Morrison's daughter, carrying secrets I didn't understand. I was leaving it as Lila Morrison, partner to Logan Park, mother-to-be, and keeper of information that would keep us all safe. Not innocent anymore, but not helpless either. My father had taught me Korean so I could understand different worlds. He'd left me files so I could survive in them. And Logan had shown me that survival wasn't the end goal. It was just the beginning. The real question was what I would build from here, what life I would create for my daughter in the space between law and criminality, between danger and safety, between the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. But that was a question for tomorrow. Tonight, I simply let myself rest in the knowledge that I was protected, that I wasn't alone, and that somehow, impossibly, I'd found something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. I'd found a future, complicated and dangerous and absolutely not what anyone would have planned. But mine nonetheless. And that, I thought as sleep finally claimed me, was enough.